Welcome to another video here on the Giant Take Podcast YouTube channel. If you can already tell, because you should, someone on my side, I don't even know if it's left or right, is a guest for this little video. Daniel Jones, we're going to talk about him a little bit. We're going to talk about this Giants QB position. It's Justin Penik from Talkin Giants. Justin, first of all, how are you, buddy?
Josh, hello. It's great to always be speaking with you. I recently just saw you at a Giants game, so it was great to see you. I hope you weren't too cold while I was being super bougie sitting in a DraftKings suite. This is a fun conversation, and sometimes as a Giants fan, and then also somebody who also talks about this team so much, I don't like to be put on the spot like this, but this is going to be a good exercise for both of us about like, hey, it is December 21st. 2021. What are the Giants going to be doing at quarterback, whether it's next year or however you define the future? So let's get to it, my friend.
Yeah, so I put out a tweet earlier today, and I just said, New York Giants fans, with Daniel Jones out for the season, what's the future at QB? And I didn't say who, I said what, because there's so many open doors that this team can go. Now, as the pessimistic Giants fan, I could say they can screw it up in every which way, which they most likely will, right? Let's be honest here, but we hope not. So I want to first go to you. And obviously, let's address the elephant in the room here. Daniel Jones was put on IR, shut down for the rest of the season because of the neck injury. So, Justin, who is the future at QB? Is it Daniel Jones?
Throw to you. How do you define future?
So I define future as he is the Giants quarterback next season, at least next season. He's the starting quarterback, or whoever this quarterback is, quote unquote, is the starting quarterback next year. Although with some of the stuff that we might talk about, that might not particularly be the case.
Yeah, gun to my head. Long story short, moral of the story. Daniel Jones is the quarterback next year, in my opinion. The thing that complicates everything is a new GM that's coming in. What does he want? I do think this new GM, if it's not a guy that's already in the building, if it's not a guy that was already part of the process of drafting Daniel Jones, because clearly if you have a Kevin Abrams in the building situation, then it's like, well, odds are somebody as high up as an assistant general manager was pretty behind drafting Daniel Jones. So I would say that he gets that fourth year. Don't think he's getting his fifth year option picked up, though. I mean, I think that's the number one, and I don't even think that's a hot take right now. I would be shocked if his fifth year option was picked up, because not only do I think does he deserve a fifth year right now, but just to give him that with that like $22 million price tag that comes in that fifth year, it's kind of absurd. So don't think that's happening. So by future 2022, yes. 2022 and beyond, right now, no.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, what do we go to next? We have Daniel Jones for 2022. We look for a draft, a draft player, a player in the draft. And I was saying to you, before we recorded, of course, the year that the Giants had the sixth pick projected right now after the Bears and Giants losing this week. Yeah, the QB class is not so good in this year's draft.
Yeah, of course. It's almost as simple as taking those fifth and those sixth picks. I really do think it's going to wind up being, either Bears Giants at 5 or Bears Giants at 6. It's going to be back to back. Just taking those two picks and going up to where the Jags are or going up to where the Jets are. It's almost crazy how, there's no QB in this class that you would really take. But all it takes is for one GM to fall in love with somebody. And that's what you see with Dave Gettleman. And that's partially why Dave Gettleman's process was so flawed, is because it was just falling in love with the player. And that's not really what a sound process is. You can like a player and fall in love with the player, but sometimes you do have to take that wide perspective look and be like, hey, this QB class maybe isn't the best. This isn't the year to do it. Don't force it. Don't force loving somebody. So this year's probably not the year to do it. But, I don't want to make it sound like it's just a definitive, like Daniel Jones is here for 2022. That's put a gun to my head. But, I could be wrong, and I've been wrong plenty of times before. Not even that's a lock, and it does depend on the new GM, and it also depends on, does Joe Judge even believe in Daniel Jones as his quarterback? I don't know. There's been no indication besides, Joe Judge has always publicly supported his players, and really he's never dismissed any player besides Matt Pear publicly. You know, but behind the scenes, Joe Judge is clearly saying things differently to his players, and he's clearly saying things differently, to his coaches and whatnot. Do they believe in Daniel Jones? I don't know. Based on how they've operated their offense with Jason Garrett the last 2 years, it would be no, like they don't. But again, I don't know. That is a variable that's unknown.
So we had a lot of responses to the tweet today. So Giants fans, this seems to be a topic of discussion,
yeah.
to say the least. So, I mean, kind of going through the list, our friend Snacks said that, it's tricky because of the neck injury. We don't know how bad it is, but he mentioned the name Derek Carr. And I want to go through some trade options because other people were also mentioning Russell Wilson in the comments. So the deal is with Russell Wilson, we're going to be giving up, I think in the last mock trade was 3 first-round picks, quote unquote, obviously mock trade, right? That's the name of it for a reason. It's not the actual trade. But we know Russell Wilson compared to Derek Carr, we would be giving up, you would expect more first round or early round draft picks for someone like Russell Wilson than someone like Derek Carr, because you're assuming that you're going to get a better quarterback in someone like Russell Wilson than you are in Derek Carr. Now, do either of those players come to your mind at all if we look for a trade?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a matter of, are you willing to say your piece with those first round picks? I mean, that's the bottom line. And if you can throw in a player like Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones, or name another ex-player that's on their rookie contract that the Giants have, Dexter Lawrence, do any of those guys sweeten the deal and do enough for teams being like, yeah, I view that guy as an additional X pick, almost like we did with Jabril Peppers. Remember how Jabril Peppers was in the league for 2 years, but Dave Gettleman viewed him as, we're basically getting another first round pick because we got Jabril Peppers, which again, flawed process. But Derek Carr and Russell Wilson are obviously, they're not bad quarterbacks. Would you prefer Russell Wilson? Yes. Derek Carr and Russell Wilson are both quarterbacks that have been able to have pretty good quarterback play despite bad offensive line play. I mean, that's been a criticism for Pete Carroll for years, is that they've never acknowledged the offensive line, despite them talking about running the ball and controlling the clock, and their skewed philosophy with such a good quarterback that they've had under center that the last couple of years, they've ignored the offensive line, and that makes no sense. Almost like it makes no sense that the Giants have ignored their offensive line. But still, a guy like Wilson has been able to really perform well, create those explosive plays, throw the ball deep down the field with the bad offensive line. And Derek Carr, 2 years ago, people were making jokes, and Derek Carr was the butt of the joke of the check down Charlie in the NFL. Now he has the most deep shots and deep passing attempts in the National Football League, and he's one of the quarterbacks that has the most deep yards in the National Football League. And his offensive line this year with the Raiders is much, much worse than the Seattle Seahawks with Russell Wilson this year. And arguably, it's around the same territory as the Giants. You see how bad the Raiders' rushing game is, and they're one of the worst in the NFL as well. So those are two guys that have been able to work with bad offensive lines, which odds are, the Giants may not have the best offensive line, but we're hoping that it improves. And especially, if you trade away those early round draft picks, you may be sacrificing the upgrades to the offensive line for the sake of getting a new quarterback in the building.
And I want to mention Derek Carr because, his situation is sort of similar to what is happening right now with the New York Giants, because I saw him repeatedly this past week, or they played yesterday, right? Repeatedly throwing to Zay Jones, all the time, because that's his number one guy right now on the Raiders.
Yeah, it's such a mess right now, because between what they had happened to Ruggs and what they had happened to Gruden, which I actually thought that they were having a pretty good flow. They were getting a pretty good rhythm with Gruden. I mean, they were an inconsistent team, but they've lost so much momentum due to a lot of outside circumstances. So it's tough to evaluate Carr right now, but you still have to evaluate him if he is a possible candidate, because that if you come to the Giants, if Kenny Galladay's hurt, if Kadarius Toney's hurt, if all these guys are hurt, then the situation may not be that much better. So, I
mean, the deal is, and you mentioned it, so we're trading picks first round picks for both of these players, you assume. How many? That's going to probably vary between the both of those quarterbacks. But the thing is, those picks can be used to rebuild this offensive line. Now, why, if you are Russell Wilson or Derek Carr, would you want to go from a team with a bad offensive line to a team with a bad offensive line? Like, where in your mind does that say, oh, yeah, this really attracts me to the New York Giants? If you're already getting blown up, especially in Russell Wilson's case right now, because, the Seattle, I don't really want to compare them to the Giants because both of them suck. Let's be honest. Both of the offensive lines are very bad. But, I mean, he's scrambling for his life in Seattle. Would he want to come to New York and scramble for his life just the same? Like, I don't know.
It's New York, though. I mean, and maybe this does not account for Derek Carr, because I don't even know if he would. I don't know if he's a guy that would want to move on from Las Vegas. I think that would have to be a situation where GMs are communicating that, and then it's just like, hey, Derek Carr, you got to move. But Russell Wilson, it seems like that's a situation where he wants to be moved. If he wants to be moved, right, where there's too many tea leaves right now. There's too many like signs that are coming from a lot of different people, including Albert Breer. Albert Breer's a, refutable. I don't think that's a word. Refutable. I think that's a better word. Refutable NFL reporter, a legit NFL reporter. That's a better word. A legit NFL reporter, and not just like a Colin Cowherd just throwing it out there into the space, right, into the world with no reason, right? Albert Breer is a legit NFL reporter, and he went on a Twitter Live, which I don't know how he did. Periscope is dead, so I don't know how he went on Twitter Live, and he's like, I think Daniel Jones is not the quarterback next year, and I think Russell Wilson is. People don't just say that to say that. Like, I don't think guys like Albert Breer just say it to say it. So there's too many signs that it's getting hard to ignore. Like, I'm usually the guy where it's like, I don't want to get too invested in rumors. I don't want to get invested in something that's not going to happen. But there's too many signs right now that it's hard to ignore. And it is a lot more than just Russell Wilson going from a crappy situation to a crappier situation. I think it's a lot of, it's New York, and why did Odell, a guy like Odell, flourish here? Because he made one play and it was in New York and it was in primetime television, and the marketability of New York is just flat out different than if you made that play in Arizona or Jacksonville, right? It's just flat out different. And I think that it's partially why Odell wanted to go to LA. He always wanted to go to LA. There's just a difference in market here. And if Russell Wilson can even have some sort of a successful season here, not even saying he can win a Super Bowl, but if he can guide the Giants to an 8-9 win season, which I will never deny that Russell Wilson can do for any football team, if he can do that, he has Giants fans on his side, and he becomes that superstar quarterback in New York.
Referring back to what you were saying, or what I said about future being like 1 year and they're going to be a starter, and I said later in the video we'll talk about that might not particularly be the case. Well, this is the deal. There's also a few free agents that are quarterbacks that are not appealing as a starting quarterback, but can be used as a second option that is not a Mike Glennon, who is absolutely horrendous and maybe the worst quarterback that we have ever seen. Okay. There are 3 quarterbacks that could very well, when Daniel Jones gets injured, if he gets injured or if he sucks, which both of those scenarios could very well happen, these 3 quarterbacks could maybe step in, take the starting role. Listen, Justin, I honestly think we're going backwards if we're paying a lot of money for a free agent quarterback to sit on the bench and maybe come in. But I'll go through the 3 names anyway. It's Jameis Winston, Teddy Bridgewater, and Marcus Mariota.
Yeah, it's tough. And, there's a lot of Giants fans that do criticize, well, why is Mike Glennon here? Why didn't we sign a better backup quarterback? The Giants are a football team that is in no position to be overpaying for a backup quarterback when they're not a winning team. They're not a Super Bowl contender. And then also, I'm a guy who likes to kind of nitpick and complain about overpaying for backups and overpaying for special teams guys. Why are we giving up draft picks for special teams guys? Why are we giving special teams guys multi-million-dollar deals? I think getting a backup quarterback that you're overpaying for, and a guy, like you said, a guy that would, if all goes correctly, a guy that just sits on the bench, it's a bad investment. And if you bring in any of those guys, now this may not be a bad thing, but it's just a situation that's created. If you bring in any of those 3 guys, a quarterback controversy is automatically created. And none of those guys excite me a lot more than Daniel Jones. That's just the bottom line. Like Jameis Winston, I know he throws for a lot of touchdown passes, with Tampa Bay when he was right. And his year was cut short due to injury. But none of those guys like overly excite me more than what Daniel Jones brings to the table.
And kind of going to this as when we talk about backup QBs, we didn't see enough of him, and hopefully we see more within the next 3 weeks of this NFL season. Jake Fromm, did he show you enough on Sunday that maybe, hey, we can underpay for a backup quarterback? This guy was on the Bills practice squad. Maybe he's a backup quarterback and we don't pay that much and sign one of these guys, overpay for them instead we underpay, get a backup quarterback like Jake Fromm.
I think there's some sort of option where he can like remain here next year anyway, which that would be cool. I mean, why not? If this is a guy that puts together a game where the Giants score 2 or 3 offensive touchdowns the final few games of the season, which against the Bears with how bad their offense is, I mean, they may have a good I think their defense is probably middle of the pack. The Bears just aren't a good team. There's any of these football teams, Bears, Eagles, or Washington can easily have 3 touchdowns scored against them. And that's not a high bar in the NFL, but we're the Giants and we're the worst offensive scoring team in the league when it comes to scoring offensive touchdowns. We're really good at kicking field goals though, 40% of our points. If Jake Fromm can show me a good game or two, then sure, let's keep him around. We got a mailbag question on Talkin Giants. What can Jake Fromm show you to possibly compete for the starting job next year? Where it's going to have to be a lot. It's going to have to be a 30-point game. But even then, you're getting close to like a Matt Flynn territory. Where remember Matt Flynn, the Packers backup quarterback a couple years ago, where he had like a 30-point, 40-point game starting for Aaron Rodgers. Then he signed to the Seattle Seahawks for a multi-year deal, and he stinks. I mean, I don't want to get in that territory where Fromm was behind the depth chart from Davis Webb, behind Davis Webb in a Buffalo Bills depth chart for a reason. He was a 5th-round pick for a reason, just like Mike Glennon is a backup for a reason. So I'm rooting for Jake Fromm. I'm a Giants fan. Root for the guys in blue. Root for him so he can maybe stick around next year and be that cheap option, like you said. I would be very down for that.
Well, if we had Colt McCoy, this situation we wouldn't even have to talk about this.
I mean, now, I want to ask you. I want to ask you a serious question. Are you sarcastic with that, or are you serious with that?
Yeah. I had a little chuckle after I said that because he didn't. I mean, I was hearing about it after he had a few good games with Arizona because it was like, why don't we keep him? Oh, he had a good game against Seattle. We ran the whole game against Seattle. I mean, you want to go back and look at that stat line. It was 3 or 4 yard passes that Colt McCoy had to complete here and there. We ran the ball all over that Seattle defense. We destroyed that Seattle defense by running the ball, and that's how we got the very narrow victory. And also, we were talking about the Giants defense at that point beating Russell Wilson like they were the 85 Bears. So yeah, exactly. If I guarantee if Mike Glennon was under center for that Seattle game, a good chance the result looks kind of similar when you have the running game that's working so well, and then a Patrick Graham classic performance on the defensive side of the ball. So you're right. It was people getting mad that Colt McCoy was performing so well in Arizona. Well, guess what? Arizona has a Super Bowl. They're a Super Bowl contender right now. So maybe it's because the roster's actually good and the Giants roster is not good. So there's a difference there. And just the last thing, like the one other option that maybe people could think is, let's cut Daniel Jones and take our losses. Yeah, you're not saving anything by doing that. So
you're costing yourself.
Yeah, there's no reason to do that. So that's just the last thing. Justin, you got any final points?
No, this was fun. Like I said, it's fun to do a gun to your head exercise sometimes. And what do you think they're going to do, or what do you want? I get scared sometimes. I get scared. I don't want people to judge me. No, but thank you for having me on. This was fun. Quarterback's the most important position, not just in football. It's the most important position in sports. So it's important to get this right. And it's important for our Giants to get this right.
Justin Penik on Twitter, Talkin Giants. You know them well. Subscribe here, drop a like, same thing on the Talkin Giants channel. We both appreciate you so much for watching, and happy holidays. And we'll see you next time for another video here on the Giant Take Podcast.